All right, we're back with Jason Coleman of Amplify Real Estate. He's with us on our Real Estate Investors Spotlight series, and we're going to talk a little bit. If you saw our last segment we did, we talked about Jason, your business, and things of that nature. But I want to talk a little bit more. I know you, and I know you've got a fantastic story. So I want to hear a little bit more about your story. So take me through that piece. Who is Jason Coleman?
Oh gosh, how much time we got? I mean, long story short or short story long, I grew up in Maryland. My wife and I both actually, and grew up on a kind of pseudo farm. Really got the work ethic from my dad. My grandfather really beat that work ethic into me to like kind of excel from a really work standpoint. Went to school at UNCG down here in Greensboro, North Carolina, and really fell in love with the triad. And it's really grown since then, which has been crazy. But I did the whole university thing. Was an elementary ed major at times. Realized I couldn't even pay the bills being a teacher. Taught kindergarten for a year and kind of got just enamored. I was just kind of disillusioned from that whole side, and worked to what they call the BS communications degree, and went that route. Got a third shift job working healthcare, kind of making ends meet, working full time in school while I was going to school full time. Played rugby in school. That was a big deal for me. Like that was a big camaraderie. Had a really close knit group of guys that really just, kind of rough and tumble stuff that we can just get together. And just, that was a really cool part of my university experience that I'll cherish forever. And that has definitely shaped me to who I am today. Got out of school, had that healthcare gig for a while, and then worked my way up to a couple of cushy gigs where I felt really invincible. And then that's when the world fell apart and you're fired, no more income, when I really thought I was at the top of my game. And that's when real estate hit us in the face, and had to have that conversation with my wife of like, we are going to shift completely into something new. And that really, I'm so glad in so many ways that happened, because I already felt driven and motivated at the time. But when that happened, I think it really did light something up in me that was just hidden for a long time. And I tell people at some of my meetups of like, I don't wish that on anybody, right? But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to just feel good with failure and failing over and over and over again in the real estate game of like, I'm just going to learn this. I'm just going to figure this out. So many people wait they just want all the stars to align, and they just want the deal to be perfect. Oh, there's 30 grand with the equity day one. Nothing's going to break. Buy it with no money down. And they just want to learn all this information, but never actually apply it. When I got fired, that truly lit something in me that was like, I call myself now, like I'm a rhino. I'm stubborn. I'm just going to keep going through walls. I'm going to keep hitting failures, and I'm just going to get back up. Like Alex Hormozy, I love that guy. The guy's crazy. Like one of his lines is like, you'll never fail if you don't give up. Like, it's the people that just stop after one or two failures and they're like, man, this doesn't work. I have stories for days about just failures on properties, relationships, businesses, LLCs, like all of it. I have gone through so many different routes to try to get to where we are today. And when people say, I have my meetups and they're like, dude, how do you know this? And I'm like, the reason I'm giving this out is because I have failed. The more I can get that information out there, the more people realize like the successful people, I think most of the people don't start with money. It's not like it's not mommy and daddy's money that they started with. I think it's like self-made millionaires are like 90% of millionaires. Mm-hmm. And that's the case. Like my parents didn't give me the money to like go and excel in this world at all, and you just need to kind of find that. I tell people like, find what's inside you that's going to motivate you through the good and the bad stuff, right? Because I've had deals fall apart that I've worked my tail off. I've had crazy bad days where if it wasn't for get back up, do this again the following day, I would have quit a long time ago, right? And I see this with other agents. I see this with other investors that are just, they want the freedom without that failure. And I think that's part of like the instant gratification, kind of the social media mindset of people just like, oh man, you can be a millionaire and live off of 2 properties and everything's great, everything's going to cash flow. And you just see these gurus pitching stuff that really does not make any sense, or like, that's not how the real world works. But if you solidify yourself and bond to this vision of, okay, there's going to be setbacks, there are going to be failures. I consider it, I fail forward, is a big mantra that I use of just like, hey, like I'm just going to keep rolling and don't take advice. This is another mantra of mine. Don't take advice from anybody that hasn't done it, right? I don't care if it's your parents, your brothers, whoever it is. So many people in your life are going to give you advice and they are not qualified to give you that advice, right? I lost my job and my mom was like, I love my mom, but she was like, go work at the post office. That's secure, it's stable. Like my dad was like, hey, come work for Metro. Like that's stable. Like that was real estate. That's whoa. My uncle, my brother lost his shirt and long lost cousin lost their shirt in 2008, 2009. Well, if you just listen to that, it's easy. I think your brain is just going to focus on that and give yourself a way out. When, again, losing my job, I think it was already there within me, but it was something that was like, okay, F this for great. Like I was just like, let's roll, and I'm going to learn as much as I can, but I am going to apply as much as I can, even if I look like an idiot. When I was door knocking, people are like, "Did you go door knocking? That's crazy." I'm like, I didn't know what to say or do the first month of me doing it. I just was knocking on doors. Hey, can I buy your house? Like, like you don't know conversation. Just like, hey, I'm an agent. I sell houses. Stuttering over my words. I have crazy stories with that. And then it got to a point of like, you get better, you get the reps in, and you start realizing I actually bring a lot of value to the table, and I'm helping people. Like I'm actually helping clients. I'm helping friends and family of like, I come from a position of value versus if you don't know what you're doing, you don't go through those failures. A lot of agents, like they're not confident because they actually haven't done the reps. They haven't gone through the hard stuff. And I know that in any conversation that has to do with finances or real estate, I can bring value to that conversation regardless of who I'm talking to. Yeah. So that's really, I don't know, it's a long, again, short story long, but that's, I think, me in a nutshell.
No, that's great. And you talked about failures. So I want to go there for a second, but I want to talk about, tell us about a failure that comes to your mind in real estate, in the investing world. Tell us that.
I got really caught up in the Airbnb arbitrage business of, hey, you can sign a lease with a landlord, and in this case was an apartment complex, where then we'll furnish it, turn it into an Airbnb, and we'll make the cash flow from the Airbnb business. We'll be paying the landlord regular long-term rent, and we'll make the upside of cash flow for like short-term rentals and managing that. I created 2 separate LLCs to operate and run this, thought I found fantastic operator, and really some of it wasn't his fault. And this was like the whole failed partnership approach. I shouldn't say approach. I jumped into 2 partnerships that had to do with this business that we did not establish roles. We did not establish the operating agreement correctly. And we got into it, and frankly, the apartment complex actually changed some of the rules on short-term rentals, on Airbnb arbitrage, that after all of this money and especially time we had invested, it went to zero, right? We barely cashed. We made no money over a course of a year and a half of just like, we just floundered. And it was a lot of time. It was a lot of effort and a decent amount of money in place where the partnerships fizzled out, the cash flow fizzled out. We got all excited in that hype. It did definitely help me with my systems, help me understand the Airbnb game a little bit more, which again, the whole fail forward. All of those failures, any of my failures, there's something to learn from every single one of those. But most people would look at that and say, well, geez, I don't want to do that. Like I learned right then and there. I mean, we dissolved those LLCs the end of last year. Like that was those were, like everybody tells you, man, you'll jump into these partnerships that make no sense. In hindsight, you're like, yeah, we got really excited. Oh, let's just create an LLC. Let's just go make money. It'll be easy. No, right? Roles weren't established. People weren't doing what they said they're going to do. It just collapsed. And that's something that, that's one of just many failures that, would I do it again? Yes. Like there's like I don't want to say like a no regrets policy in my head, but everything really shapes you to who you are. And that goes back to, you can't have one without the other. Like you have to really go through those reps. There's not a single person I don't know, like maybe somebody started a small business and then hit it big off the, like basically a lottery of a business off of just one deal. Maybe that is not the rule. That's the exception. You have to really, every single business owner, every person that has made it in their life has really just gotten back up over and over and over again until you're an overnight success, they call it. You know, like, oh man, must be nice. You start getting those comments when you're like, dude, I had so many sleepless nights just trying to figure out when COVID was going down. I had a bunch of properties under contract to buy, and I'm like, the market could go south, and whoa, what does this look like to my family? And I'm just I almost terminated the deal of a lifetime because of COVID. You know, that ended up changing the trajectory of our family. And I could have just, if I didn't have the failures before that deal, I would, if that was my first deal, I would have pulled the plug. I would have been so scared. I would have said, we're out. But hey, I know the numbers. I've learned from this. I did the reps, and I was like, is my irrational side taking over, or what's the worst case scenario here? I can still let this thing float for the next 4 years, even if the market tanks, and we'd be fine either way. And luckily, the market's done what it's done. And that one portfolio has been just a game changer for, like, not just our finances, but like me mentally. It's opened up my eyes of like, whoa, we thought we were going to own 2 or 3 properties, own them outright, and live off that cash flow. Now it's like the freedom, the cash flow, my eyes just get wider and wider every day. Every month I'm in this business, I'm like, the numbers just keep that freedom, that part of our family of like, well, now I can provide this and do this and this and that. Like, it really just starts amplifying your life. That would not happen without just failure after failure.
Right. Let me ask you this, because you mentioned something about how at any point in time, things can change. And you talk about the Airbnb piece of your business, right? Have you put any thought, or do you worry about, because that's the area of the business right now that really has very little structure.
Right.
And it depends on what municipality you go to, the rules change. What's your thought around that?
Yeah, so I don't recommend Airbnb arbitrage. That was a different thing. That was like, you were kind of working for pennies anyway. I don't recommend anybody to get into that unless it's like there isn't a lot of equity or appreciation. You're not really like fully invested. You're just kind of invested in the cash flow. With our short-term rentals, and any client that comes to me and says, I want to operate an Airbnb, I want to buy an Airbnb, right? Do not underwrite that deal based on just the short-term rental potential income, right? The short-term rental phase is, I don't want to say it's over. It's definitely fizzled out more than it was when COVID money was flying all over the place. Right. So the way that I see it is, do not buy that property unless it cash flows as a long-term rental, right? And let's say Greensboro says, I mean, we have 3 Airbnbs that are right next to each other. Like, they're on the same street, right next to each other. If Greensboro says, we're done, no more short-term rentals, the city got up, HOA, we don't have HOAs or whatever for that reason, but if the city changed their rules, I could turn those into long-term rentals and still cash flow well, not as well as a short-term rental, day one, right? If they just pulled the plug on us. So you have to have an exit strategy with really everything. You can't just go in and say, oh, if this strategy doesn't work, I'm screwed. And that's where I think a lot of people get, I mean, I'm selling 2 right now for a client that he did not purchase these properties with me. He purchased them with somebody else a long time ago, and then they're not cash flowing. And they're not even going to end up cash flowing as a long-term rental, right? And that's where you get in trouble, where he calls me 2 months ago and says, okay, we're in a situation, and luckily the market's done its thing. They're able to make their money back, plus pay the commissions and taxes or whatever. But that's not always the case. The market has been, I mean, we've talked about this many, many times. Like, people have gotten used to this appreciating market. A regular market, the listings are staying on there for 3 to 6 months, versus right now you're still getting some multiple offers that under contract in a week or whatever. But that is not the norm. And I think as we go through this, the Triad's a growing area. I think we're good we have very low inventory. We have the population moving in. I think we're good. I think we're insulated from like kind of national market statistics. I think North Carolina as a whole, we're in a really good position of net migration. So that is going to insulate you from the worst time, the bad times, right? The bad times are just not going, from a number standpoint, they're probably not going to be as bad as someplace that the population's decreasing or jobs are leaving. We have a lot going for us in the triad as a whole. So it's, if you have some place to invest, or if you're trying to pick some place to invest, you want to kind of have a fail-safe like the triad, which is where we focus the majority of our money.
Yeah, well, that's, it's funny. I hear from a lot of agents, and people outside of the industry, what's real estate like? What's it going to be like? What is it like around here? And that's what I tell them. I'm like, man, we're blessed. We're blessed to be where
We're
we're
like
at.
the Mecca.
Right. Yeah, we really are. We're blessed to be where we're at, especially going through some of the stuff we're going through. Well, Jason, thank you so much for being with us today, sharing your story, and giving these nuggets of wisdom out that you've got. They've been really good. We've got one more we're going to do with you. I can't wait to jump into that. We're going to talk about what you're really passionate about, which is financial literacy. So until next time.